Hi, Megan. Thank you for joining me. Somatics today will be a bit shorter practice, but it's one that you can sneak in, and I'm going to call it the happy hip practice. So we're going to only need our mat. There won't be any special props unless you do use a pillow underneath your head when you're on the side of when you're on your side body. So then you might want to grab a pillow or something to put under your head. And we will start down on our backs. And when you get down there, just take your feet to the ground. Take your arms out, whatever position is comfortable. Feel into your backside. And as I like to refer to them, notice your girdles. We have the pelvic girdle and the shoulder girdle, and our lovely spine running in between. And just notice where the weight is resting in your body. So do you feel a lot of weight in your pelvis? If so, is it in one particular place? Is it more towards the tail end of your pelvis or the top of your pelvis? Do you feel more weight in one side, the left or the right, than the other? See if you can find the center of your pelvis. Even if you don't feel centered, find that space centered in your pelvis. And then we're going to take our hands to our belly. Just place your hands on your belly if you'd like. Take some soft, easeful belly breaths. If in any way this doesn't feel comfortable, go back to your natural breath. Otherwise, think of your abdomen like a balloon and just gently expanding the abdomen as you breathe in. And feeling it soften and relax back into the pelvic bowl as you breathe out. So this expansion in the front of the pelvis as you breathe in. And this relaxation as you breathe out. And as you breathe out, you can let the whole back in the sides of the hips just fall into the ground as well. Feel that sense of support. And then continue to breathe to your abdomen, but notice your shoulders as well. Do you feel weight in your shoulders? What parts of your back are lifting from the floor, if any? What parts of your back and spine are in contact with the floor? So the spaces between the pelvis and the shoulder blades, or the two girdles. And then just let your breath go to however you want to breathe at this moment in time. We're going to go right into the hips. So you can keep both feet on the ground. That's going to be more comfortable for the low back, or if you like to extend a leg, you can let the right leg go out long. I'm going to keep my right foot on the floor. Just lift your left leg up, and we're going to, on the exhalation, lift it up, draw it in, so you're flexing the thigh and drawing the top of the foot towards your shin. Squeeze it in, feel that left butt cheek lift up, and then as you inhale, drop it to the ground. And then exhale, draw it in. And inhale, take it to the ground. And as you take the foot to the ground, if you want to press into it a little bit, you can. You might feel a little more action in the hamstrings. You might feel your low back lift, almost like a pelvic tilt forward, like your pelvis is tilting towards your thighs. As you exhale, notice how you're coming off of the tailbone and you're squeezing that leg in. We're just going back and forth a few times. And then we're going to add on to this movement. So right now we're doing flexion, and it's flexion of the knee, ankle, and the hip, but we're focusing on the hip. And now let's begin to slide into extension. So if your mat is too sticky, you can fold it in half or see what you need to do. But I'm going to exhale, squeeze that leg in, and then I'm going to inhale, start to slide the leg out. I might not go all the way the first time. You'll start to just go to where you feel the stretch in the top of the thigh, or maybe it's in your low back. And then as you exhale, slide the leg back in and squeeze it in again. Inhale, we're going into extension through the hip now, as far as you want to go. If you want to begin to press through the heel at any point, you can. Exhale, slide it back. And if you decide you don't want to do this to your breath, you don't have to. Or you might even go slower, get to the top of the inhale and take a few breaths and breathe into that front hip crease. Feel that freedom in the front of the thigh. Notice how your back might arch a little bit. And then as you exhale, slide the leg in. You could hold it there for a few breaths too. Notice how your low back is pressing into the ground and the bottom of the pelvic bowl lifts. So just a few more with the left leg, just extending and flexing. And imagine that you're making this movement from your hip and your pelvis. And the rest of the spine is just going to respond. So you might feel the arch even through the center of your spine as you extend the leg. Notice how the spine curls into the ground as you draw the leg in towards your body. Sense how the weight shifts. If all the weight was in your pelvis, it might be changing as you draw the leg in, or if you felt more or less weight in your shoulders. And then doing one last round. Draw that leg in, and then relax it down. We're going to continue with the left leg, but now we're going to do internal and external rotation. So that's flexion and extension. Widen your feet all the way to the edges of the mat. And then feel your left leg again, pinky toe, big toe side. As you breathe in, you're going to take the left leg out to the left side, so you're dropping onto the pinky toe. As you breathe out, come back up, flat-footed. Breathe in, drop onto the big toe side and come inward, internal rotation. Then exhale back. Now you're going in and out with the thigh. Out to the side, coming back to the middle, to the center, back to the middle. Again, noticing how that hip feels, that feeling sensation. Sometimes I'll encourage you to try to make this movement from your foot, so you could roll onto the edges of the foot. You're welcome to do that. But make sure you're also imagining moving your leg from your hip, from the pelvis. And the right leg is more or less staying quiet. I'm not dropping that one too. I'm keeping my kneecap up towards the sky. Just focusing on just that left leg. Head can respond. Just a few more, in and out. Nice gentle motion for the hip joint. And then back to the center position, and now we're going to make circles from the hip. So when we do this, we're going to start with the knee bent and just drop the lower leg down. And think of drawing a circle with your kneecap so that you're not using your lower leg. It'll look like you're trying to kick. You're using your hip. And you're going all the way around now, finding your full range of motion. Really slow and easy. Come all the way across the body, away from the body, towards the front, out to the side, back towards the body. And then if this feels okay and you want a little more stretch of your hamstrings, that's an if, you can extend the leg up, and it's going to put a lot more weight-bearing requirement too. Your leg is going to feel heavier, and the hip's going to have to work a little bit harder if you're choosing to extend the leg. It doesn't have to be fully extended. You can always keep a bend in the knee. But watch that your whole pelvis, so one thing I'll do sometimes is place my hands on my pelvis, because this is not a move the pelvis from side to side, it's move the hip or move the leg within the pelvis. So keeping the pelvis still. And think of that beautiful thigh bone, that trochanter like plugs into your hip. It's like a baseball glove, and then the ball comes right in here in the front of the hip. And if you've been going one direction, you can switch directions with, you might have the knee bent or you can have it straight. Just enjoying exploring your range of motion in that hip. So maybe you're getting deeper into the inner thigh stretch, out to the side, across, towards you. One more round. And then we're going to drop the foot down. We're going to keep going, and we're going to go back into the external rotation. So this one, you're going to cross the left ankle on the right thigh. And we start with just feeling this position, because you might already feel stretch to the back of the left hip or thigh, because this thigh is rotating outward. You might, if you feel like the left hip jumped up towards your rib cage, gently push that left hip forward so your pelvis isn't slanting or tilting to the right. You want to keep it even. Your two hip bones should be straight across from one another, not that left hip bone higher towards your ear than your right. Pause there for a moment. And then when you're ready, you're going to give that left leg a ride. So as you exhale, you're going to draw the right leg in towards your body now. Feel that stretch through the back of the left hip. Inhale, place the foot back down. Take a breath, feel the belly fill. Exhale, empty the abdomen, draw in if you'd like through the abdomen and maybe the pelvic floor, draw the leg in. And inhale, back up. Exhale, draw in. And I find that much like when I was extending the leg, when I put my right foot back down, I'm naturally going into an arch in the back. So my low back lifts up off the ground, creating that arching feeling. And then as I exhale, my tailbone curls away from the ground. But don't force it, just back and forth. So now the left leg is moving, but not because the left leg's doing the work, the right leg is doing the work. And we're going to continue with that, but we're going to lift the right foot off the floor, and we're going to make circles with the right leg. Maybe feeling it through your left leg. Nice and sweet. Going around, just exploring. You're going to feel some of those abdominal muscles and outer hip muscles to help support you. So there should be some sweetness. You can switch the direction of the circles. And one more round. And then we'll take the right foot down, take the left foot down. So I'd like you to just feel the difference. So unless your low back doesn't like your legs extended, go ahead and slide your legs out. We'll take about 10 breaths or so. And once again, notice the weight of your pelvis. Or if you found, like I said, in the beginning we had our feet on the floor, notice the weight of your pelvis here if it's more comfortable. But feel your leg line too, all the way from the toes and up. Just sensing the difference in the left and the right side. There's a lot of ways we can feel differences. It could be a temperature difference, a length difference. It might be just more of a sense of ease, or just more awareness, feeling one leg more than the other. You can do your soft belly breath, staying relaxed. Relax the low back. And notice too if there's any of those muscles that we just used that are still tight. You can even shake your legs out a little bit, encourage them to relax, or shift the pelvis from side to side. And then we're going to switch and do the opposite side. So feet back to the floor. Relax the hips down onto the ground. And we'll start with the flexion and extension in the right leg. So feel your right foot where it's touching the ground. As you breathe out, the abdomen draws in and you draw the thigh towards the abdomen, like you're squeezing the breath out of your belly. I like to pull the top of the foot towards the shin as well. And so the knee, the ankle, and the hip are in flexion. And then just inhale, drop the foot to the ground. Notice if the pelvis shifts and tilts forward. And then exhale, does the pelvis tilt back? So as your leg moves, see if the pelvis responds to the movement. You also might try to make the movement from the pelvis. What happens if, as you draw the leg in, you gently push the top rim of the pelvis into the ground or lift the tailbone? And then what happens if, when you put the foot down, you take the tailbone into the ground and lift the low back? And then we'll take this into extension. So you're still going to squeeze on the exhale. And then inhale, begin to slide that foot out. You can stop wherever you want. You don't have to go into full extension. Exhale, draw it in. Inhale, sliding out. Exhale, squeezing in. It's like you're giving your pelvis just a nice, easy rock. You might hold it for a few breaths. Notice how the weight or the shape changes in your spine too as you extend that leg. And then as you flex the leg, you feel more connection of the center of the spine to the earth. Center of the spine lifts as you extend through your foot. The thigh and the hip, feel the front of the hip crease open up. Squeezing in. You're marching in place very easily, but all the joints in that right leg are going along for the march. Last round. Or maybe you've stopped to hold it, you're welcome to do that. And sliding the foot back. We'll do the thigh bone rolling in and out, so you want to widen your feet just a little bit so the right knee doesn't crash into the left knee. Sense the big toe and little toe side of the right foot, or maybe the inner thigh of the right leg and the outer hip of the right leg. And as you breathe in, drop onto the pinky toe side, let that leg fall out to the edge. As you exhale, come back onto the flat foot, kneecap up towards the sky. Inhale onto the big toe side, let the inner thigh come towards the center of the mat. Let that outer hip stretch. Exhale back to the center. And you can just do slight movements. You can think of this big, strong femur bone and reach that femur bone towards the front left corner of the mat. And then come back and let it settle back into the hip socket. And then reach the right femur out to the right side of the mat. Let it settle back in. So I'm trying to pay attention here too, because I'll start to notice if I'm compensating, then this left hip is going to lift off the ground. I really want to try to keep my left hip on the ground and my left legs still. Just sort of working with the right side here. Back and forth. Noticing if it becomes more easeful. And sometimes easeful just means a dulling of sensation. It doesn't mean it feels great, it's just maybe less sensation is more ease. Or you can go a little further in your range of motion. Last one, back and forth. And then we'll pause. All right. So now we're going to go back into I might do things in a different order, that's okay. Back into the full circles. So starting with your right knee bent and letting the lower leg just hang, because you want to move from your hip crease. Make some circles with that right hip. Going all the way around, finding your range of motion. All the way out to that right side, forward, across to the left, like you're bringing your knee towards your nose. Sometimes I find my head likes to make little circles along with the knee. At any time you can switch the direction, but really try to keep that speed slow. We're not throwing the hip around, it's really mindful. Notice how the weight is changing in the back of your pelvis, or the way that your pelvis is resting on the earth is changing. And if you want a little bit more, go ahead and extend that leg up as you make your circles. Side to side. Back and forth. Notice when things feel like they're stretching and when muscles engage to make this movement happen. One or two more circles if you'd like. And taking the right foot back to the floor. We're going to keep the left knee in line with the hip, cross the right ankle on the left thigh. And if that right hip crease just snuck up towards your right waist, gently press the right thigh or the right hip crease towards the front of the mat. So the pelvis isn't squared off, it's not tilted to the left. Pausing there for just a moment, feeling that. Sensing where the weight is in the left foot. I usually do just a little bit of pelvic tilting first, so know what it's going to feel like. I can come onto my tailbone and then come back onto the low back, and then adding the lift to this. So you're going to feel that left leg strong and supportive now, and as you breathe out, draw the left thigh into your body, just like we did earlier before we had the right leg crossed. And then release the foot down to the ground. You might arch your back a little bit when you release down. Exhale, draw the legs in. Feel that nice stretch to the back of the right hip and thigh. Inhale, drop the foot down. Exhale, draw in. Inhale, foot comes down, arching the back. And exhale, curling in. And we can continue with the arch and curl. Maybe that's feeling like a good pace for you, or good movement, or you can lift that left leg up and go into more of a circular motion and explore some other areas in the back of the right thigh, some other ways to strengthen the left leg. The key is to be mindful, check your breath. We're staying relaxed. We want to stay in that, what we call the parasympathetic, which is just the relaxation response. No struggling or straining. And that's different than feeling muscles. You might feel especially some abdominal muscles now, outer hips. You can switch the direction of the circles. Last time around. And then take the feet down. Relax for a moment. I like to let the knees fall inward towards one another and take the heels out for this next relaxation, because we just did that external rotation, so now the thigh bones are rolled slightly inward, knees resting on each other, the inner knees, and just pause. And we're going to be switching. We'll be coming on to the right side of the body. So this is where if you want a pillow or a blanket or something underneath your head, go ahead and place that there. Underneath your head. And if we're supporting the head, you just want to make sure that the head's not way up here somewhere. So if this was like super high, I'd be up here. I want to keep my neck in a neutral position. Probably want to bring your right arm forward. And just rest down for a moment. Then you're going to stack your knees together. Slide your knees up so that the shin bones are parallel to the long edge of your mat or whatever you're resting on, and your thighs are 90 degrees from your spine, so just as if you were sitting in a chair. And the first thing we're going to do is just let that top leg be heavy on the bottom leg. Imagine you've got a handle or a doorknob right on the left hip, and you're going to hold that doorknob, and you're going to pull the door back towards your backside, and then you're going to push that door forward. And what you'll feel is I'm not lifting my thigh, I'm sliding my left hip back and forth on my right. So this is more of a mobility. It's a rotation of the hip. Left hip draws back, or you can think of pressing your left butt cheek into your hand to the back, and then bringing your left hip crease forward, or even pressing your kneecap forward. It's just that slide. Without the lift, just sliding back and forth, just loosening things up. And then you might even turn that slide into, let's do the back and forth first. So now, take that same door handle on your hip, and it's like you're going to push the door towards the foot end of your mat. So you're going to push your hip that way, and what will happen is the right side body will lift off the ground, and the left side body will get longer, and then you're going to pull the doorknob towards your armpit or towards your head. So you're pushing the hip away and pulling the hip towards you. Back and forth. So the first one was more of a rotation of the hip. This is a hiking of the hip. So you're hiking the right hip up as the left hip goes towards the foot end of the mat, and you're hiking the left hip up as the hip comes towards your armpit. All right, so now that we found all of those movements, the forward and the back and the up and the down, see if you can kind of play with putting those together. Just rolling that left hip, even if it's just a slight movement, go really slow. My rule with the sticky spots is go even slower. That's how we can retrain the brain to make it through those sticky spots. And one thing you might find is that you're really using more of the power of the leg. And initially you can, if you find your leg is lifting like this to help move that hip, That's okay, because that's going to help you to feel what it feels like to move the hip. But then see if you can lay that left inner thigh on top of the right thigh and use the pelvic muscles themselves. So the leg is more relaxed. And you can switch the direction of the circles. Feels nice, yeah? And then relax. All right, so that was waking up the muscles. Now we're going to get a little bit deeper into the musculature of the hips, and it'll feel like a little bit more work, but hopefully not too much. So you're going to keep the big toe side of the feet together, feel where the inner knees are touching. And I like to do this to my breath. As I breathe in, I'm going to lift the top left leg, but notice I'm not going way up here, because then the hip will actually fall back. The left hip, it's like that doorknob is pulling my left hip back. I don't want that. I want the doorknob to stay right at center. My left hip is staying stacked on top of my right. I'm just going to slightly lift that top leg, and then I'm going to take it down, let it fall, and relax. So you should feel something maybe going on right in this outer hip and thigh. Outer left hip coming down. The effort to lift, you're going against gravity, pulling away from gravity, and then that ease of dropping back down and relaxing. You can explore slightly pushing the big toe side of the feet together. The other thing I check is it might feel different. If you're lifting like 6 inches, that's one thing. What happens if you only lift an inch? Or 2 inches? Maybe that's 2 inches. So play with how high you lift that leg up. And we're watching to see if these muscles engage on the outer hip. You might even get a little achy in that outer left hip. But also that they release. Can you let them come down and release? So this is our muscles that externally rotate our thigh, which when we were on our back, we were externally rotating. But it might have been a little bit easier, because now we've got gravity pulling this hip down, and we're trying to pull the leg away from gravity. A little more muscular work. Last one. And then relax it down. In between, I like to make either those back and forth, the up and down, or the circles. Just release that hip. Sometimes it feels good to give it a gentle, loving fist. Remember, it's gentle and loving. And then we're going to keep the inner knees together. I call the last one is the clamshell, and then this is the mermaid tail. So we're visiting the sea right now. So keeping the inner knees together. Now as you exhale, think lift the top foot. But watch that the top foot doesn't go forward, or what more typically happens is it goes back here. Keep the heels in the same alignment so it comes straight up. And what you should notice is your left thigh rolls inward. So that's the muscles of internal rotation. And then you exhale and drop it back down. Inhaling and lifting. And my knees not lifting, just the foot. Inner knees are touching, exhaling back down. See what you feel right in that hip. Notice if you feel some engagement in your inner thigh now as well. And I typically am doing one movement, or one breath per movement, but know that anytime you can move slower, you could take it to your end point and hold for a few breaths to really get a feeling of what are the muscles doing to take the leg, the hip, into this internal rotation. And same thing, when you drop down, do they relax? Do they let go? Up and down, just really easily. Sticking with the hips, just focusing on the hips. So there's our internal, external rotation, just like we did on our backside. And now we're going to do the extension and flexion we did on our backside. But once again, it'll be different because we've changed our body relative to gravity, we have to work a little bit more when we're on our side. So now you can feel free to extend that right leg to whatever degree you need to, so that your hips stay stacked, left hip on top of the right. So we don't want the pelvis rolling forward. We don't want it rolling back here. So right leg, we want to kind of balance on that outer right hip. And then you're going to lift your left leg up until the ankle is at about, you can even look for a moment, the ankle is at about the height of the hip. So not way up here. Doesn't have to be that high. In fact, a lot of times it's more challenging if it's just lifted to the height of the hip. So as if I were standing and my front hip crease, my knee and my ankle are in the same line. And then we're going to feel the ankle, the knee, and the hip as you breathe in go into extension. So reach the toes away from your hip. Reach all the way back behind you, but I'm not rolling my hip. I might even keep a hand here. I'm reaching behind myself. So what you should feel is some pretty strong butt muscles and the back, so the back of the thigh engage. That's your extenders of your hip. And then as you exhale, we're coming into flexion. So you're going to draw the top of the foot towards your shin, draw your thigh towards your body, and squeeze in just like we did on our backside. But now you can go deeper into both of these movements, inhaling into the extension, exhaling. You're marching into the flexion, draw it all the way in. And include the ankle if you can. Feel the top of the ankle open so that whole front line of the leg is stretching as you breathe in and reach behind you towards that back left corner of the room. As you breathe out and draw in, you can even draw your front abdominal muscles in, top of the foot towards your shin, so your ankle's involved. Feel the bottom of the foot stretch. Take your time. You can hold anywhere along the movement. Move through it slower. As best you can, keeping the pelvis still, so it really helps me to keep a hand here. Otherwise, I find that I'm really rocking my pelvis back and forth. And I want to feel like my pelvis is staying firmly planted and stable, and it's the leg hinging. So it's like the leg is like, if it were a pendulum, gently swinging from the hip socket. Take just a few more. Feel the burn. I start to feel it in the back here a little bit. Last one. And then let the leg fall down. Now it might feel really juicy to either rock that hip back and forth, roll it around. And we're going to be switching sides. I'm going to switch so I can see you, but what you can do is roll on either your front side or your back side. Maybe you're a front belly sleeper and you want to go on your front side for a moment, but pick a side, go onto that side, and compare the two sides again. Just notice your two legs and your two hips. Can you feel a difference between the two sides? Whether you're on your back or your front. I buy myself some time to resituate. But you, more importantly, are doing that comparison, letting your mind compare. Because that's a really important part of this practice. That's how we relearn. What do the two sides feel like? Even the smallest differences, just noticing. Like I said the other day, we're really good at noticing things like when we're hungry or cold or when we have to go to the bathroom. But to be able to feel these subtleties of what comfort feels like in the body or what relaxation feels like, and then on the other side, what do tense muscles feel like? What does it feel like when your muscles are really working for you? And having that control to relax them when they're done. Because that's our natural position as body muscles relaxed onto the bones. And then we'll switch sides, so if you're on your front or your back, we'll be rolling onto our left side. I like to kind of tuck that left shoulder. Feel free to put something underneath your left ear and support your head. This first one, we're a little more specific with the legs, so you want to draw your thighs up so that your thigh bones are 90 degrees from your spine and your shins are parallel to the long edge of the mat. So create that 90-degree angle. Let the legs stack and relax. Feel the weight of the right thigh just falling into the left thigh. And then we're going to do that hip slide. So I imagined the doorknob last time. If that works for you, go for that again. So it's like you're pulling the door the door on your hip to the back side, and then you're pushing it forward. So that doorknob is going back and forth. Or you can put a hand on your right butt cheek, push that upper right or outer right butt cheek into your hand. You might even put a hand on your right kneecap, push your right kneecap into your hand as you come forward. You're just getting the inner thighs to slide. But the inner thighs are sliding because the hip is moving in a rotational movement. It's rotating forward as the knee comes forward and rotating back as the knee goes back. The thigh slides back. And a lot of times you'll sense that there's more restriction in one side than the other. That's completely normal. Something that this practice has gifted me over the years is recognizing that my imbalances or asymmetries, you can call them whatever you want if you want a fancier word, are okay. It's completely normal, and we can have these asymmetries, and it doesn't mean that it's painful or that there's something wrong. It just means the two sides are different. That's all. And then sliding back again. And this is definitely a movement that I feel my asymmetry. Maybe you do too. Let me know in the comments. So now we've got that doorknob again, and we're going to pull that doorknob or push the doorknob towards the foot end. You'll feel your left rib cage maybe lift off the ground, and you'll feel this right side get long, especially right above the waist there, the low waist. So pushing the hip forward. And then you're going to take that hip and imagine that doorknob drawing up towards your armpit. So pull the right hip towards your armpit. And this is more of a hip hike. So the left hip will hike towards your head as the right hip goes away from you. And then if you want to do this to your breath, I exhale and draw the right hip towards my armpit. It's hiking towards my head. And then inhale, feel that right side stretch out. Left side will shorten and contract. Exhale, right side contracts, left side lengthens. And if you close your eyes, you might even be able to imagine if you were standing right now, this is kind of part of the movement of when we walk, is we lift a leg up to take a step, and that leg that lifts up, the hip has to lift up too. So that's that exhalation on the right leg. And then we go to put the foot back down on the ground, and that hip lengthens towards the ground. And now that we found both movements, so the slide back and forth or the rotation and the lifts, see if you can start to put those together. And I mentioned on the last side that sometimes it's hard to find at first. So being that this is my sticky side, I'll sometimes let my leg come in, I'll let it lift up and make the movement initially so I can feel, what does that feel like to take my hip in full smooth circles? But then I recognize I'm using my leg muscles, not my hip muscles, and I really want to feel more hip muscles. So now that I kind of have an idea of what it feels like, I'll let the upper leg relax. It's tired anyhow, it wants to relax. And then see if you can roll from the hip. That door handle's there. Or maybe now you're stirring your pot. And stir it around in full circles. Take that right hip around. And that right leg might still slide, doesn't have to. You can always switch the direction of the circles. Just exploring. Think of this thigh bone coming into the hip, and the hip socket is right in the front of the hip, really. I always used to picture it on the outside. It's right in the front. So you're just moving that thigh bone in that hip socket. Nice gentle circles. Noticing what muscles you feel. And then we'll relax for a moment before we dig into what feels like a little bit more work usually to me. So your knees are still stacked in that 90-degree angle. You want to keep your big toe side of your feet together and watch that the hips aren't rolling back or forward, right hip stacked on top of the left. When you're ready, this is our clamshell. So imagine a clam opening. You're going to inhale and lift the right leg up. See if you feel anything happen in this outer hip, some engagement, and then exhale, slowly let it come down and release. Feel the muscles help to lift, and then feel them slow release. So this is representative of the external rotation that we did when we were on our back. A little more work this time. Another thing to notice is that you're not tightening. Make sure you're not putting tension somewhere else in your body. Sometimes that tension will go from one area to another where it just doesn't belong at all, like your jaw or your shoulders. Maybe even into your low back. So can you really isolate? Feel how strong this outer right hip is. And then slowly let it set down and relax. You might hold it up there for a few breaths. You might even press the big toe side of the feet together just a little bit. Or remember, holding it, it's going to feel different if you lift several inches versus just 1 or 2 inches. I find that this is more challenging when my knees are closer together. Then I really get that burn, baby, burn right here. And then dropping it down, relaxing it. Do one more round if you'd like. Happy hips. And take it down. Relax. So that was our external rotators. Now we'll do our internal rotators. So the knees will stay together. Same foot position. Feel where the big toe side or the arch side of your feet are touching. Now as you breathe out, lift up the top foot. So right foot's going to lift away from the left foot. Notice how the thigh bone spirals inward towards the left thigh. And then as you exhale, let it come down. Watch that the foot's not floating forward or back, so keep the ankles in line with one another from the floor to the ceiling. I tend to keep a hand on the top hip just to make sure I don't roll back, or this one I tend to roll forward for some reason. I let that right hip roll forward. And you can tell because your knees should be stacked on top of each other too, not that right knee forward or back. Although you can always change it too. Just a different way to do the same thing. That's important to remember. I walk you through certain things, but this is really just an exploration. So if you find yourself doing something differently than the way I'm explaining it, it's not that it's wrong. What I want you to recognize is that you're doing it mindfully. If you're doing it differently, maybe you decided, well, let me see what it feels like to bring this right knee forward and then lift my foot up. That's all good because it's voluntary. That's the key, is that it's not a mistake if we're doing it intentionally. If we're recruiting muscles or recruiting things in a way that is mindful. And one more round, lifting up and dropping down, relaxing. Got one more, that's the flexion extension. I'll tell you, I really like this one. I'm fingers crossed. Sorry for you non-snow lovers. I'm ready. I got my cross-country skis out. I'm ready to ski. And these are all really important movements for cross-country skiing for me, to get my hips and thighs and buttocks muscles going, but specifically the flexion and extension, because when you ski, you've got a really big pull apart of the legs and come back together. So let's go into that one. So if you're a cross-country skier, this is a good warm-up. Maybe we'll do specific class this winter for cross-country skiing. So you can take that bottom leg comfortable wherever it wants to be so that you can keep your right hip stacked on top of the left. And then you're going to extend through your right leg, lift it up till it feels like the heel's at about the height of the hip, so you can look, so you're not way up here, too low, just right at about the height of the hip. And then we'll go into extension first, so reach the toes away from the top of the foot, reach back with the back of the knee and the thigh. So you're going to feel this nice long line through the front of the right leg and a tightening through the back of the leg, even into the buttocks. And then as you exhale, draw the top of the foot towards the shin, knee towards your ribs, thigh towards your ribs, squeeze in. There's your flexion. Inhaling into extension. I can even feel it through my belly. Exhale, flexion, drawing in. And I know I've been sitting a lot today, so for me, this extending behind me feels so good. I imagine it's like a dog who, when their owner comes home and they put their tail up, it's like they're just stretching their tail out, and it feels so good. It's like, this is my tail, and I'm stretching it out because I'm so happy. And then I can draw it back in. I know it's a leg, it's not a tail. But whatever you got to do, whatever you got to tell yourself to relate more intimately to your body. So if a picture of a dog tail comes to mind, that works. Maybe it is a pendulum, swinging that pendulum. Or it could be my leg in a ski movement, pushing off on the ball of the foot with that back leg as I ski, and then pulling it forward powerfully. And do one more round if you'd like. Remember the option to hold. And then drop the legs down. All right, as I mentioned, we're going to keep this one short and sweet. So we are going to roll onto our backs. If you'd like to come into the position that feels best for you for relaxation, that might include putting something underneath your knees. If you're extending your legs, you could take a bolster, a blanket, put them underneath. Or that option of letting the knees fall together, feet on the ground, you decide. If you get there and you know your hips just want a little bit more playfulness or movement, feel free to roll them around again, or even just feet on the floor, this rocking movement. See if you feel more of a sense of freedom. And the whole girdle, the whole pelvic girdle. More control. Control is freedom. They seem so opposite, but it's not. The more control we have of our muscles, the more freedom, because part of the control is learning to release them. Yeah. And then find that space where you want to be still. In your lovely, lovely hips, the happy hip practice. Hips are a space of nourishment in our body. That's our pelvic girdle holds space for two of our chakras, our energy centers. If you visualize the base of your spine, the Muladhara chakra, mula meaning root. And it's the color red if you see red. And it's related to the element of earth. So when we want to ground, we can visualize the base of our spine and or the legs. It's the bottom of the pelvis all the way down to the toes, where we meet the earth with our bodies when we walk. The Muladhara is invigorated and awakened by the sense of smell. So if you have a favorite scent that you can think of, maybe right now it's a holiday scent, pine. I've been infusing some pine in my house. But if that's not for you, choose your favorite scent. So we can hold memories and invoke those memories just by the thought of scent, not even scent itself. And the Muladhara is our space where we recognize our survival instinct, our most primitive brain, that need for shelter and clothing and food, and those most basic needs being met. I find that it responds positively to thoughts of gratitude for what we have. Acknowledgement. And if you'd like to shift your awareness into the softness of the low belly or the backside around the sacrum. This is our Svadhisthana chakra. Svadhisthana in Sanskrit means one's own place. The color is orange. And it's related to the water element. I often find, as I am now, that when I'm in this space, my body makes gentle movements like waves. You might think of how much water is contained in your body on the physical level. Always changing, always moving. And this is our space where we find pleasure and passion. But it can also be a bit of an emotional roller coaster at times, because passion includes those things that we want. We can be passionate about wanting something, and we can also be passionate about not wanting something. Attraction to things and repulsion away from things. Think of that water element. Allow it to soothe and soften the abdomen and the whole space of the pelvis around the outer hips and the backside. That sacred sacral bone. Holding it all together. And the Svadhisthana chakra loves when we eat. It's can be nurtured through the foods we eat, as it's connected to our sense of taste. Maybe there's a favorite food you're eating right now for the holidays, and you can put the smell and the taste together. You've got Muladhara and Svadhisthana. Such satisfaction. And remember that the next time you take a bite of something. One of the ways that we can easily keep these centers healthy is just by eating mindfully. Smell your food, take the time to taste your food. Have gratitude for it. Prepare your food with love. Recognize where the Muladhara is all about providing our basic life necessities. The Svadhisthana wants more. It asks for pleasure. What are some of your pleasures? Our reproductive center. Creativity. And just begin to take some breaths, as if your whole pelvis can breathe. Feel the outer hips, the front of the belly, the softness in the front side of the pelvis, the back side, that protection of the bones in the back, strong and supportive. And the base of your pelvis. And just breathe. Breathe as if your pelvis is taking in all of that oxygen. Feeling the abdomen move in and out. The sense of ease. And when you're ready to get up, think of stretching the two ends of your body, your legs and your upper body in opposite directions away from the pelvis. Take a big full body stretch. Reach your arms up away, your legs away, anything else you like to do. Maybe you like to start with smaller movements, the fingers, the toes. Licking your lips, that's a luscious thing to do. If you're going to finish your class seated with me, please feel free to do that. You can roll to one side, or perhaps you choose to stay in this lingering position in the darkness of the winter. Enjoy your time here with your happy hips. I hope your hips are happy. I hope your holidays are happy. Peace, joy, love, and light. Namaste.